All right, we're talking today with Gary Ray. This is our 16th episode of the Mindful Wealth podcast. And Gary, I just want to say thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Great. I've been so impressed with you as a person for about 20 years and with what you've built. And I'm glad you're willing to kind of come on and share it and talk about it with us. So just to get us started, tell us a little bit about your path and tell us a little bit about how you got here and what you're up to.
Well, right now I have a hobby game store of all things. So I sell things like board games and Dungeons and Dragons, and I've been doing that for 17 years now. I've written a book on it, on how you can do it too. And the subtitle of the book is how to obtain a middle-class income. So we're talking not a lot of money here. This is not a path to great financial success, but it's something I'm interested in. A lot of people are interested in. So this is kind of how to do it so you can actually survive and not be poor. Before that, I was in IT for 10 years.
Okay, and that's quite the transition.
Yeah.
I have to say, you are successful, and I see your life and your freedom that you've created for you and your family as impressive and something that many people with more resources don't have. So just, can you define for us what in your terms is true wealth?
It's a time and money issue. So I want to be able to do whatever I want with my time, and money is the path to that goal. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes enough money. And of course, that's the big issue, is how much do you need? There's always something else you could do.
Well, like maybe, we can just poke at that a little bit. How do you, if there is sort of like, this tension between time and money, between stress you're willing to take on, obligations you're willing to take on as a small business person, how were you able to kind of find the sweet spot there where you can, how can I say, balance your comfort and the lifestyle you want with the amount of money you make?
I was dispensable. I didn't want to be indispensable. And so I built these processes and procedures with this idea of, once I have these in place, I'm not, first of all, not needed, which means it's going to be a better business anyway, and it'll be more valuable. It also means I can do the next thing, which could be a second business, a second location, or whatever. So I stepped back and did all the projects that I thought I needed to do that had been piling up in my inbox. And I figured that would be my life, would just be doing all these projects. But I finished them in about 3 months, everything that I had. So I kind of worked myself out of a job. And then I tried to find added value for me in the business, but really I was kind of ready for the next thing, but I didn't have a next thing yet.
I do notice that you have, your next thing has been, and this I think goes to that definition of true wealth. I think that your next thing was always spending time with your son, and you've done some amazing things that I honestly envy with your son and with your family. And so, can you just kind of just a brief, this is wealth to me because this was what I was able to do with my time?
You only have so much time with your children. They grow up, they go away. So every summer with him was, an opportunity that I didn't want to miss. And I discovered that travel with him was a great way to connect. And it was also educational for him. And because of the way we traveled, there was adversity. So it taught how to overcome adversity and how to be a resilient person. So I just discovered that whenever I could travel with him and kind of adventure travel, it was just a great enriching experience for both of us. And then that just kind of grew bigger and bigger over time. So I think the last big one we went on was almost 3 months in Central America and Mexico.
And that ended with what?
That was fine. That one didn't end badly.
Oh, it was the one. Okay. But the Jeep's right now in the shop for being rolled from like the high center of gravity, right? Come on.
This year we went on a trip and it's COVID, so it's a bit difficult. So the theme of the trip was we were going to go to indigenous settlements throughout the Southwest, and I just linked them together, and we went on some really amazing places all the way through Arizona to Colorado to New Mexico. I had an amazing time, and there was mistakes were made. And on our kind of our last trip, we're going to go see some petroglyphs in Valley of Fire State Park in Nevada. And I tipped the Jeep over on its side, and we had to be towed out of there. That was not my best day.
I think it's a great story, and I think you can tell the story, and it is him living through adversity, and it is, you know, it speaks to your ability to not focus on more and think about that enough and put those things in place to enable that time spend is incredible, and he'll never forget that, and neither will you. I mean, it's amazing, and I'm very impressed with it all the time. Is there any like single thing that you did that enabled this? Like if you wanted to say to somebody else, hey, you know, there's systems and processes, there's faith in your people, there's hiring the right people. What is the thing that enabled you to create time?
The processes and procedures is the key to all of that, and hiring and developing good staff. I mean, I rely on my manager and my staff tremendously for day-to-day stuff. I still work in the business remotely, so I'm not gone. In fact, I feel more attached now that I'm not there in a strange way. But I would say that's the big thing, is developing those processes and procedures and planning to do the next thing. And you don't have to know what the next thing is. I completely disengaged because I had the confidence that I could always step back in and take over again.
I wonder if I can like sort of ask you, you know, people who struggle with this kind of balance. What do you think the biggest obstacles people face when it comes to building true wealth and fulfillment? Where are the places where people trip themselves up, in your opinion?
Well, I can't have everything, right? So there are areas in my life that are not developed. Like I have friends that are wealthy and they can do A, B, and C, and maybe I'll do C with them, right? I can only afford C. So I'm saving up for my big trip, and they're like, hey, let's go to Europe for a month, you know, this summer. I'm like, you're confused. I'm saving up for the big trip. So I can only afford my one thing. It also means my other things like retirement savings are not really where they should be. That would be nice. I think anytime you're engaged in an adventure travel, for example, there's no good time to go because you're either going to be too old to go or you're not going to have the money. So at a certain point, you just have to say, we're just going to spend the money or we're going to go do this. And everything else can wait. And, you know, you have a kid, you have only so many of those years where you do this in theory. Although, as I do have plans for when he's out of school and I go off on my own adventures. So I don't know if does that answer your question? That's a lot of rambling.
Well, like, I wonder if you could just sort of be more specific. I mean, surely, you know, you see other people living either sort of in a fulfilled way with their level of wealth, and you see other people who have somehow made the wrong trade-offs. So either that is their, you know, income is too low so that they constantly feel pinched by the fact that they're restrained by that, or you see, like you say, wealthy people who are somehow chained to the office. And so it seems that like, and I think this is why Jonathan invited you on the show, is that you seem to have struck a very good balance with your lifestyle versus money trade-off. And so if you were to observe or make an observation about where other people make mistakes and how they handle their setup, like what's the problem? Is the problem a practical problem? Is the problem like a mental problem where people somehow don't frame things the right way and so they end up making the wrong trade-offs? Like what do you think of that?
I have friends at this point who, if you've played by the rules, you've developed quite a bit of wealth. I have friends who could retire right now and they're working jobs they hate. And this is very strange to me because my thinking as a business owner is, how much money do I need to not do this anymore? So I kind of feel bad for the ones that are never really going to have their adventures because they're too afraid to disengage. I also never started a business to become wealthy or to even I never planned to actually have this kind of freedom. I think success just kind of caught up with me in a way. I'm not amazingly successful, but I'm successful enough to do what I want, which is perfect for me. But that was never a goal to, if I could just work another so many years, I could go travel for 6 months out of the year. Because honestly, if I had thought like that, I would have done it a lot sooner. Because I spent it took me 9 years to just finally step away from the counter alone. And I could have done it a lot earlier than that.
So this actually gets to this question of autonomy. I remember, back in the day when you started Black Diamond Games, and I remember the analysis you went through to do it. And you just said you didn't plan on having this kind of freedom. You just wanted to do something that was more towards your heart. So how did you go from, I want to do something I love, to, wow, I can have freedom with this, and that's really what I want? When was that realization? You said it took 9 years, but how did that develop?
Even when you start a small business, it feels like it's a transgression. You feel like you're doing something wrong, right? Because you don't have a boss. You don't know what to do. It's like every single day, what do I do? There's no one to tell you what to do. Your job is to make money. How do you make money? No one knows. That's for you to figure out.
And I do know this is just from watching you work with things. You have always been focused on developing the people that work there, and you've always been protective of them, saying things like, we don't need this person's business. I don't care how much they spend here. If they're going to misbehave, they're not allowed to come back. And that's been impressive. So I know that you've stood up for people.
I think one of the things you learn is that staff come first.
Yep.
They're absolutely the first priority. I think it's a Richard Branson thing too that he talks about. But so once the staff come first, then you're obviously developing staff, and you expect your staff to behave properly, and you would never allow your staff to behave badly towards customers. And then you can worry about the customers after once you've handled your staff, the staff will serve the customers well, I think. So yeah. So is that it?
No, sure.
Yeah.
I wonder if, just to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this a little bit more, maybe you can tell us about how you ended up planning the business, because I think the importance of having a good business plan, and then being able to sort of look into the future and see how you can see how it's going to be successful, or how it's going to meet the goals that you set. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and there's two parts of that. The first part is I wrote a book on how to do that, on how to start this kind of business, and all the nuts and bolts and stuff, how to write the plan and all that. That's called Friendly Local Game Store. I'll give my little plug there. And the reason I wrote the book was there was nothing like that when I started, and I had no idea what I was doing. I started with an idea, and Jonathan actually was very instrumental in insisting that I write a business plan, which I had never done. And in the business plan are all the financials that are now just commonplace that I can, I look at them daily, where before they were, trying to figure out a income statement and a balance sheet was impossible. I really didn't understand anything that was going on with those types of documents. So I wrote the business plan, and it really did feel like mimicking other business plans with a few personal details. And I did the research. The research was critical to the success of the business. And some things I nailed really well. For some odd reason, I nailed my sales forecasts, which are completely something you shouldn't be able to nail because it's completely made up. But I got my expenses off by 50%. So I really was not prepared at all for starting, and I paid for it. I tell people you either come with experience and you pay for it with that experience, or you come with extra capital that you're gonna burn to get that experience.
It's important to have a model. I think if you were giving advice to, let's say, other small business owners who are getting ready to start, you feel like it's very important to have that kind of model and a blueprint for what you think is going to happen.
Oh yeah, the biggest thing is it's going to be scary, and you're going to have a lot of self-doubt. And if you have a plan and it's a good plan, and you've shown it to people and who know what they're doing and they think it's a good plan, you can have some faith in the plan if the plan is right. And no plan survives contact with the enemy, but the business plan should be some sort of a guide, right? It should help you along. And that's what I did. I had faith in the plan. That's what I kept saying, just have faith in the plan.
I want to shift back to culture and society here for a second. Our ambition and the quest for wealth inherently selfish? Can we have achievement, or can achievement be practiced as both personal and social? Can achievement and building wealth be a societal positive.
You having discussions with you about this in past years has been very helpful. And I have to have I have a little bit of faith in the system as in its ability to bring people out of poverty and suffering, right? We have less poverty and suffering and war than we've had in the past. I want to think that that's related to bringing people up out of poverty. So that's at the kind of the big, 30,000 foot level, right? Personally, I always have my doubts because I have a Buddhist background. I'm always watching for distraction, right? And a lot of my spending verges on distraction. I don't want to, and I try to avoid that as much as possible. But there's a lot of distraction going on from what's really happening. And I have a lot of appreciation for people who are actually using wealth to make the world better. I'm just trying to have a good time with my boy.
But I mean, I think that might be like a bit simplistic in the sense that, like, it sounds like you run a business that puts employees first and that provides a service that brings people together in gaming, right? So somehow by creating the kind of business that you want to have that embodies your values, like presumably that has a kind of an impact on the world. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to be a bit understated, but like ultimately that seems like a pretty big contribution.
I actually forget about that. I forget. I try, because I try not to let my ego get inflated, and I can't measure these things, right? These things are hard to measure, and I'm all about how do I measure this business to improve it and make it better. But I mean, I've had this discussion with like Buddhist teachers about, well, you're bringing people joy in a difficult world, so that should count for something. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, but still, I don't feel like I'm not saving lives at the hospital. And yes, and I'm providing jobs and the whole, collecting taxes and the whole thing, making the community a better place. But it's hard for me, being more numbers driven, to kind of wrap my head around that. And I know it's true. I know it's there.
And you multiply that by thousands and thousands of businesses, not all of which operate as nicely and kindly in their universe as you do, but there's a lot of things created by that. And I think it's important to keep that in mind.
And occasionally the customers there'll be an outpouring of support, like during COVID. I will be like legitimately surprised, right? Like I feel so undeserving of that, because I'm doing this thing and I get my rewards and I get to go do my stuff. And okay, I'm helping people, but I don't think too much about that. I just think about how to make everything better. So when they do kind of come out and show me they support us by, usually with their wallets, but even just, thanking us, I'm surprised every time it happens.
So I still want to pick at this a little bit though. And there's these, external markers of success. There's wealth, there's status, there's, you just go on social media, you see photos of all of it all the time, right? How do you reconcile that with, and I know you have a sort of a deep spiritual practice. How do you reconcile the two, the external markers with the internal well-being and spiritual practice that I know you pursue?
I've done all this through trial and error. So I've had the fancy cars, and I've done the big trips, to Europe and stuff like that. And I've tried all of the markers of success, as you would say. And I was on the property ladder until I started the business. I think I'm old enough to realize that none of those things bring me any happiness, and it might bring other people happiness, but just doesn't do anything for me. So I'm just looking at like right now, what do I have to do to get to where I want to go? And everything else is kind of extra. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I already live in my community that I live in, is through the store, they're not a very wealthy group of people. So there's nobody really to impress. In fact, when you run a store and you have any sort of ostentatious wealth, it's held against you. Yeah. You show up in a new car, people start to wonder why they're shopping with you. Why am I giving this guy money when he's buying new cars? He must be making too much.
It's an interesting commentary on local ownership. Because if you own shares in, say, Amazon, and you have multi-billions because of how much of Amazon you own, we make fun of him from afar, but he doesn't affect his customer base. His customer base ignores that and orders. Whereas if you're the local guy and you have a local shop, whether you're I have a buddy of mine who's a real estate agent, and he drives, a very, very, very modest Toyota. He doesn't even, not a high-end Toyota. And he does that because he doesn't want his clients to see that he has wealth, which is interesting. It's almost
but Jonathan, I was just gonna make the comment, like, so I'm also in real estate, and I was just gonna say that, and I don't know if it's, maybe like Montreal is like hardly a big city, but like here, real estate agents often will have a really nice car because people judge the level of success of the agent by how nice their car is. And so like they can live in a dump, nobody sees a dump, but like when you show up to a visit or you show up to a client's house, you want them to get the impression that you're successful. And so like, I think, if you look at the contrast there, I think maybe, I'm not sure if your industry is the same, Jonathan, I would assume that it is, but definitely in real estate, like conspicuous signs of wealth, be it, your watch, your car, how you dress, the restaurants you can go to and like wave your card around. Like there's definitely a status hierarchy there that people use to signal how well they're doing.
I think the signal, it's a very interesting conversation, because I think the signals in Montreal are different than the signals in Berkeley, California. Right. I think the Berkeley, California, you drive an electric vehicle, and so it's, you don't have ostentatious showing of wealth, and it is, it isn't something that is accepted here. If you go to Texas, more accepted, bigger vehicles, right? It's a different culture and a different set of values, I think, around what is important. And I think the reason I like having Gary on is because he has built a balance between those conspicuous showings of wealth and happiness. Like those things are unnecessary to create happiness, unless they're and we've had Sonia Lubomirsky on, and she said, if you seek out wealth and that's your target, you can't be happy, because there's always going to be more wealth. You can't reach it. And the reality is, if you can find what makes you happy and you can reach that, that's what you should strive for. And I think Gary's done that. I think that's a rare thing.
And in small business, it's one of those things where it takes a long time to have any sort of profit at all. And you get so fixated on profit, you don't even know what profit looks like. You don't understand like how after a certain point you've kind of covered your nut and everything else is just pure kind of profit after cost of goods. I mean, there's things like, it took me a long time to like, how does this work? How does this money, this extra money come? How does this even function? Because it just took so long. So I know one of the things that I did is once I had money, I spent a lot of money really fast my first couple of years. And then I kind of settled down. I'm like, okay, fine. This might be a thing that continues. Let's just cool it and have some goals. But I remember I remember having tremendous guilt from buying a new Volkswagen, right? Like I wrote a whole thing about like, oh my God, I mean, what are they going to say now about me? I show up in this new Volkswagen.
Wow, that's funny.
I've had fancy cars in the past, but this was different. This is a different culture.
It's a Volkswagen, like watch out. But if we can sort of step back into the macro for a minute, if you were king for a day, what rule would you change? And who do you think would be the biggest beneficiary, and who would bear the greatest cost of that rule change?
That's a really tough one. I mean, the thing that vexes me is globalization and labor. And if I was king for a day, I mean, I understand where we're at, where we're kind of spreading the wealth through globalization. And I'm hoping for a quicker equalization is what I'm hoping for. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would want this jobs and opportunity all throughout the world, all through Africa. Let's get Africa settled. And I'm hoping to get to a point where it makes more sense to make things in this country, and I want to see wages stabilized, because right now wages are where my business has the hardest time, and I've become the enemy. My particular type of business has gone from a great place for college kids to work part-time to an expectation that a family of four is going to make a living selling Magic the Gathering cards.
You want to change culture. That's not a rule change. You want to create this equality, so that, and I often talk about, we're passing the baton to the emerging world. And by
Right.
passing the baton to the emerging world, we're sort of gutting our own middle.
We are.
And that
It's
there isn't
inevitable.
another way to do it. That's hard.
No, I want it I want it to be faster, is what I'm saying. Or you can't make it go away. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. But if we could make that happen faster, that would be my magic wand waving. Although
Yeah.
I don't know what faster looks like. It could be more pain for the middle.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think, when you, Jonathan, we had Mark Blythe on a few shows back, and he really gets into like the economics of this, because I think it's an incredibly complex problem, because, there's one thing with allowing capital to move, but making labor bounded by national borders, right? Because that's basically what we've done with certain kinds of deregulation. Like the US labor force is trapped in the US, and business can sort of delocalize itself. And so then that creates, like you said, lifting some of the developing world up, but then at the same time, exactly what are you doing with labor in those different places? And so it's a complex issue.
So, over time, like I've come to see financial freedom as a practice, like fitness or meditation practice,
Right.
with both, mental things you got to work on and actual steps to take. How would you describe the process that you went through to get to your true wealth?
There's pitfalls in this. And I started with a pitfall. I started reading the 4-Hour Work Week, right? Which I consider to be a big pitfall, because it's streamlining, essentially, right? It's streamlining your operation, and that's great if you're drop shipping stuff from a warehouse in the Midwest somewhere. But if you're doing customer service, you can't streamline, right? You are customer driven. So the tendency is to make things easier, so you have more time, is to remove exceptions, remove the customer service, essentially. And I did a lot of that. I removed a lot of the roadblocks that were taking up a lot of time. And I realized that a lot of those roadblocks had value. A lot of those things were value adds. So there's just some things that are inevitably going to take up a lot of time. And rather than not doing them, I train other people on how to do them better. Because before I would have to do all those things. Is this too vague? Is this too vague a description? So, for example, we do 400 special orders a year, which means a customer pre-orders an item or orders an item, and I have to hand watch that item go through this distribution system and come out the other side and get shipped to us, and then contact that customer, right? And we have a 99% success rate at getting the customer the thing they want. That sucks. 99% is not good enough, right? So do you stop doing it, or do you keep trying to get that last 1%? Well, if you're all about 4 hours of work a week or aiming towards that, you might just stop doing those special orders entirely, because it takes up so much time. But it would be better to come up with new technology or new processes to get the last 1%. So that's kind of just one example of things where it seems like you should streamline to gain additional time, but in reality, you're losing customer service. Therefore, find better ways to do what you're doing now.
Yeah, I find that's so interesting. Like, I don't know in your communities how things are looking right now, but like up here, it's like basically they're trying to eliminate customer service entirely. Like you go to the supermarket now and there's like the scan caches where everybody can go out, and then there's like the one cashier with a line of like 40 people. And it seems like they're really trying to just like eliminate, or the phone system where you call press 1 for this, press 2 for this, and like you can't actually get a human being on the phone anymore. And so it seems like one of the things is to just eliminate all of that customer service entirely.
Yeah, we don't have many legs to stand on, right? Because we're not the cheapest. We don't have everything in the universe in our store. So customer service needs to be front and center. We have to be knowledgeable. We have to be able to handhold and get people to the product that they want. And we also are all about events and experiential retail, because that's really all we have. We can't be turnkey like Amazon, because there's already an Amazon. They do it better. They'll always be bigger than us. So that's the big thing, is you can't, it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You got to be careful on what you're
Mhm.
what you're pruning.
Yeah,
'Cause
well, especially like given your business model. And so like, I'm just curious, like, how is it being in that space right now? Because I think, one of the things like in real estate, we talk about what's happening with retail, because obviously we're interested in retail rents, right? And like one of the things that gets mentioned all the time is, oh, well, retail's dead, right? Like your type of store is the type of store that's supposed to be getting put out of business by the big forces that are going on. So what is your experience like of being in that space?
Well, I have it's kind of a pet peeve. My feel on it is the media only reports on publicly traded companies. They don't really care about small business. You can't put your finger on it. You can't wrap your arms around small business. So we're pretty much ignored. And there's some businesses that are just always going to be okay, but we're just not small enough where you can invest in, so no one really cares about us. But that said, COVID, almost crushed us, like it almost crushed a lot of people. But we're counter cyclical. So when things are bad, people gravitate towards us, which is nice. And we're in my particular trade is in a growth spurt right now. It culturally, people are very much into nerd culture and hobby games and stuff.
There is something I think and maybe maybe doing this intentionally, maybe this is purely accidental, but I think that when you set out to start Black Diamond Games, you set out to build a different kind of game store. I remember, looking at game stores where all of the employees, nothing wrong with this, but all the employees were all tattooed and pierced and had purple hair, and had poorly lit game stores and poorly lit places, and everything was dingy and dirty, and games were stacked all over the place in complete disarray. And you were like, you know what, we can actually make this local experience better. And I think because of that stance at the outset, in like the last, I don't know how many years has it been since you've been in business, but many of your game store, compatriots in your local area have gone under. Many more have been born, and then they've gone under, and they've been born again and gone under, and born again and gone under. And you've been a stalwart, steady presence in your community for a long time because you've served the customer. And so there's a counter argument to the Amazon thing. People, thrive on connection. That's what we want, is connection. And so how do we get that? You
Right.
created it.
I almost need someone to sit next to me and bring this stuff up whenever I talk, because like I said, all this soft stuff that we're talking about are things they're kind of byproducts of running a good business, I think. And they're not things that I ever quantify or try to make more of. They're just a wonderful byproduct of like profit of doing a good job, right? And I thought I quit my IT career because I could run a better game store, and that was kind of the trap. That's my joke, is it's a trap thinking you can do it better, because of course you can do it better, right? And then you get in there and you have ideas, and then you realize your ideas don't work, and you start doing things like other people. But there are limits. You still want it clean, and you still want it well. You remember the things that really bugged you, right? And for me, it was, I want to be in a place where I'm going to be here every day. This place needs to be nice, because I like nice places. Why would I want to live in a dump? So I kind of go beyond my trade and to retail in general. What are the current retail trends? What are good retail fixtures, not just what game stores use, which they generally buy at IKEA. The IKEA, the Meltorp tables and the Calyx shelves on every single game store. So I buy fancy handmade wood fixtures from Oregon, that match the entire store. That's what I need. That's what I want. That's how it should be. So, and people respond to that. They like that we have a space, like our gaming space was built in 2016, and we built that space, and it's built to purpose and to code. And it doesn't stink because it has the correct amount of air conditioners and airflow and bathrooms and space between tables. Everything is correct and right, which is super uncommon with what we do in this trade.
Yep. You can set yourself apart by just setting yourself apart.
Just do things right, and I never think of competitors as those beneath me. They're always the ones up there, right? They're like, I'm competing against Amazon and sometimes Barnes and Noble and things like that. I'd never think of myself as competing against the small store across town. I just don't care. what they're doing. I'm doing the best that I can do with what I'm doing, and aiming higher. If I'm gonna beat on somebody, I'm gonna always beat on the bigger guy.
Fair enough. Hey, tell us, just before we wrap up, tell us what, and I know that you and I have talked about this over the years, but what is the next project? You mentioned earlier that, setting this up so you can be free to do other things, force you to find other things to do. So what is that next thing that you're going to do?
The Harvard Business Review article talked about the Maui Beach House, right? So if you can't, so here's how it goes. If your business is successful, you can expand, you can merge, you can go public, you can do all these different things, and they all have a big chance of failure, right? So if you don't want to expand, you don't want to fail, one of the examples they give is the Maui Beach House, which is basically, as the owner, you focus on a project. And a project is big enough to distract you from breaking your business with the next big thing, right? So I'm building my Maui Beach House, which is essentially, this is my plan to go to Mexico for 6 months out of the year. I have a 5-year plan to visit all these pueblos mágicos, these towns in Mexico. And I'm going to have a 30-foot travel trailer and a big truck, and we're going to take it down there and spend 6 months out of the year. I'm going to be able to work from my trailer, so I'm still connected to the store. And then 6 months come back and catch up on things. So that's my next plan, and I have one after that, but that's the next one.
Very exciting. Gary, thanks for joining us, man. This has been fun.
It was a good fun. Yes.